It would seem that the David Grusch situation is even crazier than any of us could have possibly expected. Now, David Grusch, of course, blew to popularity because back in 2023, he did that now infamous News Nation episode where he sat down with Ross Coulthart to talk about what he knew with regards to NHI, aliens, technology, and all the rest of it. The rest is kind of history. He then sat for Congress in 2023. And ever since then, he's kind of taken a bit of a backseat and done a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. But it seems that he's still got a lot of influence in the UFO space, and he's still talking in a lot of people's ears. As, of course, Representative Burlison has recently taken him on as a personal advisor for the next 4 months with regards to his UAP stuff that he's going to be doing within Congress. And there's been a lot of stuff that has already been spoken about with regards to Donald Trump, for example. I made a video about that yesterday, but that video led me down a bit of a rabbit hole of like just kind of further personal research that I was just intrigued by. And the more that I found, the more I was like, whoa, David Grusch has been talking to a lot of people about a lot of different stuff, and I thought I'd just share it in a video. So first person he's spoken to away from Burlison is Matt Ford, right? So Matt Ford, of course, is another person who's very into the UAP topic, and apparently David Grusch recommended that he speak to Reed Summers, who is of course the son of Marshall Summers, who claimed to since the 1990s to be in contact with aliens and channel messages from aliens. It's an interesting claim, of course, to make, but that's not the only thing that he's really like known for, right? So he was born in and this is Marshall Summers, by the way. Born on January 28th, 1949, he was an American spiritual leader who claims to have received divine revelation since 1981 following an encounter with a, quote, angelic presence in the American Southwest. He founded a Society for the New Message in 1992, a non-profit organization that promotes his teachings and work blends spirituality, exotheological theology, and also warnings about global challenges, including alien contact. So Summers is actually best known for his Allies of Humanity briefings, a series of books which consisted of 4 volumes as of 2019 that he claims were transmitted from extraterrestrial beings observing Earth, distinct from his other writings which he attributes to an angelic source. And he also compares humanity's situation to that of indigenous peoples encountering colonizing forces, warning that some alien races are manipulative and pose a threat to human sovereignty. So, that's a little bit more about Summers in case you'd never really heard of them. But obviously David Grusch vouches for him because he's told Matt Ford to go and seek him out and to talk to him about what he knows in this little clip right here.
Good to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for joining us. We've been chatting for a while about having you on the show, and how I found out about you. Interestingly enough, so I've known David Grusch for quite some time, even before he was public. And I was asking him one day, who would be someone that maybe is not on my radar that would be a really great guest, and he immediately brought your name up. He's like, you got to get this Reed guy on. He's doing really amazing work. And so thanks for joining.
So, it's interesting, right? But moving on to Burlison, obviously Burlison, like I said, has taken on David Grusch as this like advisor role within the UAP situation, and he apparently, introduced him to someone who talks to aliens or angels, and similarly to that of what we've just spoken about.
That there's so much truth in the Bible. In fact, so I'll tell you guys something that I have. David Grusch put me in contact with an individual who blew my mind. I don't know if I can believe him, but it's an individual who has aliens talk to him, and this individual went from being a Jewish person to being an atheist in his life. When he started talking to what he calls his aliens or angels, they started talking to him. He has these strange experiences, and and then his wife will transcribe what he says, and a lot of it is predictions that come true. And what he told me is he became a Christian. He started believing in Jesus because these things that were talking to him said, yes, Jesus is real. Jesus, I mean, was a real person. He really did perform these miracles, and this guy, and he was the Messiah, and he is part of the divine council with God. And then a guy who didn't even know what the divine council was, the Bible, suddenly was being told through. So anyway, that was an interesting thing. So let me go back to your question. When you ask, like, all these ancient, like, megalithic sites like Machu Picchu, or the pyramids in the pyramids that are in, whether in the Aztec Empire, the Inca, and then you've got pyramids of Egypt, I mean, it's ubiquitous across the world, and some of these sites have got stone structures at their base that there's even modern technology and modern machinery would have a very difficult time putting in place and making it that perfect. It suggests to me that there were ancient civilizations that were extremely advanced. And what happens is you do, and I think Tim Alberino is right, like, you have cataclysm occur, whether it's a comet that hits, or it's the poles that the electromagnetic, the
Noah's
magnetic
Ark.
poles.
Noah's Ark, Eric.
Yes, and so it creates the Noah's Ark experience, right? And so if you read the Bible, pre-Noah was a pretty wild period in world history. And that pre-Noah period, you had, and this where it fits in with the UFO phenomenon, okay? And when David Grusch is telling me that there's a Nordic type of aliens that crossbreeds with humans and creates this crossbreed, in the Bible it describes this. In Genesis 6, it says that basically angels looked down and lusted after the women of earth. They decided to come together, and they came down and they copulated with so basically they created hybrids, and the hybrids were called the Nephilim. And the Nephilim were considered giants or mighty men, basically demigods. And so the question is, like, when you hear this, it's like, it sounds like just wild, but it's in the Bible. And if you look through not just the Bible, but what about Greek mythology? You look at every, like, major historical document. It always goes back to some tale about a god that comes down, creates a half breed, and then that half breed rules. And so, I don't, like, to me, that's a fascinating overlap that consistently happens. And so what Tim Alberino says is that, look, the Bible describes angels as non-earth creatures. At the end of the day, that means they're alien. They're not from planet Earth. They're from somewhere else. And we tend to think of them as, like, ethereal, that they're just these, like, shadow type figures, but they do have physical form, because if you read the Bible, they have physical form. They often actually look weird because they're startling when people see them. And they always have to say, "Do not be afraid," when somebody sees them. So that tells you that they don't always look human. And so it's an interesting overlap with this whole the history of our civilization, potentially.
I'm with you on that, and you can respond.
Interestingly, we're seeing quite a lot of religion being brought into the UAP topic now. You may remember that Matthew Brown interview that was done with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, the 3-part series. On the final, like, some of the bow out words that he used was about how God is real and stuff like this. Now, I'm not a religious person by any stretch of the imagination, but so I'm not exactly, like, best educated to kind of comment on that situation. But it's a topic that we're seeing brought up a lot more often, is this of religion and angels and God and Jesus and stuff like this, and these biblical figures being brought into the conversation alongside the UAPs and aliens and all the rest of it. Interestingly, obviously, he spoke about the quote-unquote half-breeds there, where it was, it's one of those ones that was apparently briefed to Donald Trump, right, during his time as president. He was getting impeached at the time, I believe, was the kind of the context of the situation. And, he was spoken to about half-breed, half-alien, half-human, like, species, right? And how they're quite, like, advanced and, way more advanced than us of humans in terms of their minds and their, like, physical bodies. And apparently Trump even joked about it, even like labeling some people in his party and within his government as, these half-breed aliens, and made like light of the situation. And, you can hear Eric Burlison talking about it right here.
That the Nordic people or the Nordic aliens are like a few hundred years more advanced than we are, but they're not super advanced. They're not like, he said, the Greys, whatever is sending the Greys is extremely advanced, like thousands and thousands of years more advanced than us, because it's doing all the anti-gravity stuff, all the crazy, all this crazy stuff that's very highly advanced. And a lot of it is what he says with the Greys is psionic. So they basically don't have physical interfaces. They're using their mind, and that there's an interface that picks up thought, and then that and that's how they operate these vehicles, is out of psionic. But the Nordic people somewhat resemble humans, and they have been experimenting with crossbreeding with humans. And he says some of them, that there are aliens that are crossbreeds living in the world. And I asked him, I go, okay, do they know that they're a crossbreed, or do they, like, how would you know that they are a crossbreed? And he didn't have an answer for that. Like, he didn't know if they knew what, but he said that the briefings he's had talked about them. And he said when Trump was briefed on this topic, because Trump finally had a briefing, and he was in the middle of impeachment, like he was in the middle of being impeached. So he's going through that, and then he had like this existential briefing that just kind of rocked his worldview. He joked in the briefing, whenever they said that there are these half breeds, he joked that Adam Schiff must be one of them. And so, yeah, Nifty Schiff is an alien, half breed.
I mean, I could see him being.
It's wild, isn't it? Like, the claims that are being made and things like this, it is actually quite wild. Apparently, if it rocks Donald Trump's worldview, then who knows, man? Who knows? All very interesting stuff. What do you guys think? Obviously, David Grusch getting in the ears of a lot of people, telling them to all kind of communicate with one another. I think David Grusch has kind of stood the test of time when it comes to whistleblowers. We've seen whistleblowers come and go. Jason Sands, for example, he was quite short-lived. I don't know what he's up to these days. Matthew Brown, obviously, he's very recent, so, we've got to give that one a bit of time. Other people along those lines, right? They've come and they've gone. Only the like for example, Dr. Stephen Greer, Bob Lazar, David Grusch now. He's been through the rigorous, like, been put through the ringer, everything being kind of like thrown against him, but he seems to still be here and very, I guess, reputable to people in power. So it's bombshell. Had to get it in somewhere. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. While you're down there, jump to get the hell out of that like button and subscribe. And until next time, I'll speak to you later. Peace.